begin by asking you about your service to Senator Kerry as his legislative director. In that position, were you involved in overseeing his work on budget issues and budget concerns?
In the role of legislative director for Senator Kerry, I had responsibility for managing his entire legislative agenda. That included the development of his proposals, his work on relating to the budget, as well as his appropriations work. As I developed various policy proposals and managed that process, we worked through the cost implications and how to pay for those proposals, in addition to the budget and appropriations work.
I can just say my legislative director, who's been with me now almost 20 years, is involved in every serious deliberation that involves my responsibility on this committee. I think that's typically the way it is done here, that a legislative director is involved in all of the major issues that a senator is involved in. Let me ask you, with respect to your positions at the White House as Deputy Assistant to the President and Deputy Director of the Domestic Policy Council, I'm much less familiar with how the Domestic Policy Council functions, but I'd ask you, were you involved in budget issues there as the Deputy Director?
Yes, for the past 2 years as a member of the Domestic Policy Council and a senior member there, we worked very, very closely with OMB in the development of the President's budget, specifically on the domestic agenda. We worked on the education reforms and many of the proposals from the very first days of the administration.
And Director Liu tells me that he personally selected you to be his deputy. Is that your understanding?
Yes, that's my understanding.
And can you tell us why you think Director Liu thought you would be especially valuable to him?
Yes, when I spoke to the director about this position, this opportunity, he explained that there were essentially 3 major functions that he would expect the deputy to perform. The first would be working closely with him to develop the President's annual budget. The second is internal management of OMB. And the third is to lead and coordinate OMB's participation in the policymaking process, both in the executive office of the President as well as with the agencies. It's very important that OMB's equities and sensibilities are part of those conversations, and that's part of the experience that he thought I would contribute to. He knows that the experience that I have had throughout my over a decade working in different policy positions in the legislative and the executive branch have given me a breadth of experience on policy that is suitable to the task at OMB, which is to work to assemble the President's budget. And in those varied experiences have had the opportunity to make trade-offs and decisions and choices about what we need to do, what we need to propose, and how to pay for it.
I would just say I've now looked at previous deputies and their backgrounds. Mr. McMillan served from July of 2006 to January of 2009. He had been an advisor to the White House Chief of Staff. He had been on the Senate Banking Committee staff. Mr. Kaplan, who served as OMB Deputy Director, had been Special Assistant to the President, much as you have been, in the Office of the Chief of Staff, and had been a policy advisor to the Bush-Cheney campaign, just as you were an advisor to the Obama campaign. And before that, had been actually a law clerk for justices at the Supreme Court. And Nancy Dorn, who was a previous deputy director, had worked in legislative affairs for Vice President Cheney, was a defense and foreign policy advisor to Speaker Hastert, had been a lobbyist here in Washington, and a member of the Inter-American Bank Foundation, and an assistant secretary of the Army. So it's interesting, really, how close your background matches the backgrounds of 3 previous deputy directors of the Office of Management and Budget.